session on business reorganization. As we discussed earlier on, business restructuring and reorganization both were planned to be held simultaneously so that there is a thinking on how they are also different and how there are certain common principles. And we have two very learned speakers with us today, Mr. Arun Saripalli and Mr. Rajesh Kotak, who will be dealing with this issue. Before they start off, I'll just introduce both of the speakers to all of you here. Arun is a member of the Chartered Accountants of India and has over 10 years of experience in the field of transfer pricing alone. Over the span of his career, Arun has been involved in advising clients on various transfer pricing matters and has advised clients across industries including automation technologies, industrial equipments, turnkey projects, pharmaceuticals, financial services, and IT and ITES. And he has been involved in preparation of transfer pricing documentation for a host of clients and has successfully represented clients before the TPO, CIT appeals, DRP, and ITAT. And apart from advising on transfer pricing matters, he has worked on several restructuring projects. His areas of specialization include tax optimization strategies and value chain transformation, local and global TP documentation, TP audit and litigation strategy and defense, and also handling APA applications filed with the tax authorities. And he is a regular speaker on transfer pricing forums, and personally also I know him very well. We have been associated in the past, and he has been a very good friend. And also apart from that, currently he is also a convener of the Chambers Transfer Pricing Study Circle, which holds a meeting almost every once at least once a month, where he comes and shares his views, and we discuss several issues there. Thanks, Arun, for taking out your time today. The second joint speaker is Mr. Rajesh Kotak. He has over 8 years experience advising clients on innovative transfer pricing opportunities and strategies, and combining industry insight with technical skills to provide holistic solutions from a commercial, tax, and regulatory perspective. He specializes in evaluating PE exposures and formulating PE mitigation strategies, and on tax efficient structuring options for inbound investments, and on tax incentives and litigation. His clients also include a number of companies in sectors of manufacturing, pharma, chemicals, electronics, FMCG, and his experience covers assisting a global Japanese chemicals major in setting TP policy for the transaction of its Singapore subsidiary with an Indian JV company, and also broadly on handling APA applications and assisting on the same, handling appellate matters, and on leading telecom MNC to put in place an appropriate pricing policy for its intercompany transactions. He is a qualified member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and also of SEMA UK. Many thanks, Rajesh, for sparing your time. He has been a regular speaker here also and in various other forums. So we welcome both the speakers. And before we start off the technical content, I would request Devendra Bhai to please hand over a memento to both speakers as a mark of our respect. Arun and Rajesh, whenever. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. It was supposed to be a good morning, 11:45, but sorry, I got delayed. So it's a good afternoon now. So first of all, I would like to thank all of you, including Rutvik, Devendra Bhai, for giving us this opportunity to share our views and thoughts on this topic. And as Rutvik has rightly set the tone, business restructuring and business reorganization, the tax side of it and the commercial side of it, should go hand in hand. You had a session by Bipin where he spoke about what OECD is going to say, what are the various exit charge, etc., all those things which he has spoken. What we will be trying to cover in our session is what happens in case there is a demerger, amalgamation, what are the tax issues arising out of that. Obviously, this is a very vast topic, so we will not be able to cover everything. But if you have any specific questions or queries, please feel free to ask and make this session as interactive as possible so that, when we walk out of that room, all of us are, equally educated, including yourselves and us. So on that note, let me start this presentation of today. By the way, what we will be doing is me and my co-speaker will be speaking simultaneously. So it will be a sort of a jugalbandi that we do. I want an equal jugalbandi from all of you guys, because this session is meant to be adjudicating all of us. So I want your participation in as much as possible as what we will be doing. So on that note, let's start. Basically, before we get into the nitty-gritties of this, let's step back and think, what is the relevance of this topic to all of us? Why are we here to talk about this topic? Why? Any thoughts? Come on, you heard a lot of it. See, what is happening is, I'm sure all of you know, of late, with increasing globalization, increasing commercialization, what has been happening is, there are a lot of deals which are happening. Mergers, acquisitions, stake sales, capital reductions, buybacks, and there are whole host of reasons other than tax. We will get into the nitty-gritties, but there are a whole host of reasons why these things are being done. So if I had to just quickly think about what are the recent deals which have happened in this space, think about the Etihad Jet deal. All of you must have read about it. Google acquiring a company in India, Bangalore-based Impremium. Aditya Birla acquiring a stake in JP Cements. And the stakes involved in all of these deals are very, very high. Some 3,000 crores, 5,000 crores. And what happens is, unless you plan your, deals very properly, there is going to be someone which is on the left-hand side, taxman, who is going to knock at your doors. Just go back and think, the deal of Vodafone, the famous Vodafone One, had it been planned a bit better, probably, Vodafone would have not got this litigation which it is having. And I'm not saying that, you can stop the taxman from coming to your steps, but if you're able to do your homework very well, you can mitigate it. Because, see, taxman being unreasonable, you cannot stop, well appreciated. But if your homework is ready, you have a better defense to argue. That's the whole point. So, just to give an illustration, see, all these companies like Nokia's and Shells of the world, though they were doing something bona fide, they still have the taxman at their door. But what is going to happen is, this Vodafone and Shell, the share issue thing which is going to come up before the Bombay High Court, they have a very good defense to argue. That's the difference between the Vodafone 1 and Vodafone 3. I'm sure everyone knows about Vodafone 1 and 3. Vodafone 1 is when Vodafone acquired Hutchinson's stake, and Vodafone 3 is the transaction where Vodafone India had issued shares to the overseas Vodafone Group company. So, having said that, let's spend a few minutes on why people would like to do some business restructurings. Any thoughts? I just said a few minutes back. It's have to be participative. Sir, please. Okay. Anything else? Okay. I hope there is no tax guy in this room. Okay. Anything else? Yeah, please. Okay. Sir. Okay. Okay. That's I think that was the precise answer I was thinking about. See, what is happening is, globally, as we see globalization happening, people going across border, and competition increasing. See, gone are the days when people used to have monopoly. Those markets are gone. Today, each industry, and 99.99% of them, are operating in either highly competitive market, or they are oligopolistic. Which means that for you to survive and then grow, you need to keep innovating. Keep innovating in all terms. How do you monitor your supply chain? How do you restructure your supply chain so that efficiencies can be achieved? How do you cut on some of the costs? How do you cut on some duplicative costs? How do you place let me give you an example. In a multinational organization, typically R&D centers have been set up at various locations. It's a duplication. Why don't we have a central R&D hub? So with that objective, what is happening? So that is one of the commercial objectives why a restructuring is being done. So what these type of MNCs do is that they try to close down on all of the R&Ds and create a central R&D hub which will be doing R&D for all group companies. The result, a better transfer pricing policy in place. The result, consequent reduction in the taxation, and obviously economies of scale, etc. will result. So that's some of the reasons. Even if you think about customer demands, many a times what customers will prefer is to have a low cost product. Obviously, all of us, as costs are inflating, we would like to see some low cost products. How do you do that? Shift your manufacturing bases to low cost countries. We have seen that happening. The cost base getting shifted to India, cost base getting shifted to Bangladesh, Vietnams of the world. So these are some of the drivers why a restructuring happens. And I always keep saying whenever I meet tax authorities, and they have a different perspective of this, restructuring is driven by commercial and economic reasons, and tax is a consequence. The tax authorities start with the presumption that tax is the driver. See, please understand, tax in most of the cases is 30%. But the balance 70% is the other business and commercial reasons. And believe me, and most of you will be having this experience, whenever you go to an organization and talk to tax guy, operations guy, he will say, tax come later. It's the operations first. So that's somewhere I would believe it should be the first line of defense when you are preparing your documentation. How do you defend a business restructuring? That should be the first line of argument. What is the commercial driver for it? Because if you start saying, and I heard someone saying that saving, I think he said that saving of taxes, that cannot be the reason. Saving of taxes should be a consequence. Only then your restructuring will be respected. And I'm sure Bipin has touched on this topic, that tax should be the consequence. The commercial reason has to come first, right?
At times, what is saying is like at times, even for saving tax, not income tax, sales tax on plastic item in Maharashtra is 13%.
Right.
And it is nil.
Right.
So this is the driver which has taken all the industry to this level. Maybe you consider the commercial expenses as a low cost manufacturing base. So particularly in Indian context,
Correct.
data point gathering, that may be having a better focus.
No, it's a fair point. So as I said, even if you look at there, like people had warehouses in various states because of CST problem and the domestic VAT problem. So there, when they are creating these things, it's not income tax which they are trying to save. They are trying to overall reduce the cost. That cost is the driver. So I think how do we position it also plays a lot of challenge role in this. And unless we are able to put across the right words and the right meanings, so the way you said tax, I think the way he said cost, there's a huge difference in this. That needs to be taken care of, and we will touch upon this in bit more detail when we talk talk about it in later slides. So I'm not going to talk too much on this unless any of you wants me to talk about, because I think in earlier presentation this must have been touched upon. But if any of you want a specific thing, I will be happy to talk. What happens is there are some common concerns when a business restructuring is being done or a reorganization is being done. What happens to the exit charge? Is an exit charge payable in the first place? What is the quantification of the exit charge, and who should get that exit charge? So, and exit charge on what? Is there an IP generated? Is there a valuable in the first place? So on and so forth. Then I have spoken about substance requirements. You need to have right substance in place. There are P risk, etc., which arise from this. Indirect tax implications that we just spoke in brief. Commercial rationale. So all of these things have to be taken care of whenever you are doing a business restructuring or a reorganization, for your reorganization to be respected by the tax authorities. Any thoughts on this before I move into the next slide? Great. This is one of my favorites. So having had spoken about all of this business structuring, business restructuring, how does transfer pricing come into play? What has been happening is, if you read the typical definition of section 92B1, section 92B1 used to say that the transaction should have a bearing on income, profits, assets of a company, of an enterprise for TP to get attracted. That's how it stands. But Finance Act 2012 has expanded this definition, and they have included this term of business restructuring and saying that this business restructuring or business reorganization will be covered as an international transaction, irrespective of the fact that there is a bearing on the profit, income, losses or assets. Whether it has or it does not have, it will still be covered. What does it signify? Why? What is the relevance of this? Okay. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Anything? Because typically I will go back to the fundamentals of TP, and I'm sure you must have been hearing it out, that the fundamental of transfer pricing provisions is to prevent the erosion of a tax base of a country. If there is no erosion of tax base, then why do we require this section? If this transaction of shifting is not having any bearing, why are we getting into it? I fail to understand. Any thoughts? Okay, I'll share my view why Taxman has brought this into the legislation. See, what is happening is sometimes the transfer might not have an immediate implication on the income, but it might have the implication in some time in the future. Let's say there is a shareholding which is transferred from so there is a holding by a US company of an Indian company that is transferred to a Mauritius company. No impact on Indian P&L, nothing to be done. No. So why? But what happens is later, 5 years or 10 years down the line, when this Mauritius entity sells the shares of the Indian company, it is tax exempt. So the tax which was payable on their sale of shares get exempted. So this type of thing is being tried, or the tax authorities have tried to capture it by introducing this provision, saying that any type of restructuring or reorganization which is happening, you should disclose it out and let us evaluate whether it is fair or not, or whether it has a TP implication or not, whether there is to be any reporting to be done or not. Having said this, that we have been talking about business restructuring and business reorganization. Fundamental question is, what is this business restructuring and business reorganization? What is it? Where is the definition of it? I have read the Income Tax Act and at least I have not found it. So, what is business restructuring? Can I say that there is a chairman of the group who has been removed from his post and there is a new chairman which has been brought in? Can I call it as business reorganization? So, what is the definition then? Any thoughts?
Just to add one more interesting point on this, is that the taxman actually was courageous enough to define intangible, but left something which is very easy for him, probably as considering two intangibles to define. I think it's on. So the taxman actually was courageous enough to define intangibles which no one in the world, any authority has actually went ahead and defined what is an intangible actually. And this is something which they have left open to say that please put any type of business restructuring something openly keeping this word without defining the word. And it's really a big question because the way Arun had said, even the chairman shifting or even the senior management team changing, do you really say that's a business change which has happened? Any change do you intend to cover in this? Do you want to know every change? That's the intention. Or you are looking at shares, or you are looking at balance sheet restructuring. What is the intention really? Because the restructuring and reorganization is understood in many different ways by accounting people, by finance, by operational people in multiple manners. How do you really go about doing that? That's the biggest question here.
Right. And as always with our Income Tax Act, there is an ambiguity because it's not defined. So as I said, the chairman shifting, or let's say there is a movement of some senior people from A company to B company of the same group. Whether it qualifies as reorganization, I don't know. So what we have tried to do is we have tried to put some some of their definitions which can possibly classify as a business reorganization. So if I go back to Income Tax Act itself, there is a section 44DB, but that 44DB is in the context of cooperative banks, which says that business reorganization in respect of a cooperative bank means reorganization of business involving amalgamation of demerger of a cooperative bank. But this definition is too narrow and it is specifically for that purpose of that cooperative bank. So I cannot use the same definition to say reorganization of a company means amalgamation or demerger of a company with another company. I cannot substitute that. So what do? It's just a persuasive value for me then, because the challenge still remains. It's a specific section for specific purpose.
Has it been argued? I mean, because there is no other definition in the act,
Yeah.
and all cooperative banks are also companies.
Hmm.
Can you say in pari materia, has it been argued in this matter?
No, it has not been argued. See, because
It's
this.
a good case for arguing that, because first you go to the act itself, then two other statutes, and then to the lexicon.
Oh yeah.
That's the hierarchy
Yeah,
of
yeah. That is the precise reason why we have also tried to put definition in the same order. And I'll walk you through some more definitions on this. See, what is happening is, why this has not been argued still now is this definition has been amended by Finance Act 2012 with retrospective effect from 2002. Retrospective, we are very good at it. We make retrospective amendments every now and then. So the challenge is, these cases will now come up for adjudication by TPO authorities, and then probably you'll have all these disputes coming up. But so far, there have been some cases, some judgments where this has been not argued in as much depth. There has been a discussion, but so having said that, we try to come across some of the definitions which have been given by various other bodies. Let's go to the definition which has been given by Taxman's Dictionary for CA and CS, very relevant for us. If you guys take a minute to just read this definition, because I don't want to read it, just take a minute to read this out. It's on slide 37.
Slide 37, yeah.
Anyway, it's displayed out there. Correct. Correct. So now, if you read this definition very, very carefully, and go back to the discussion that comments that I made a few minutes back, nowhere in this definition they are saying that they are not at all talking about tax. They are talking about the fact is that corporates. So this definition actually gives credence to the fact that corporates increasingly are requiring to re-engineer themselves, to remodel themselves, because a traditional model which was working in 1950s will not work in 2012. Today we are in a world of digital economy. 1950s where the conventional traditional models, they don't work anymore now. So that's why all businesses need to develop themselves, re-engineer their processes, redevelop their systems. That is what this definition is trying to say. So it is not tax. It is the economic reasons and the commercial reasons which they are talking about. If I move to the Blacklaw's Dictionary, which is slightly broader than the definition that we saw as per the Taxman, this definition is talking to say that yes, it is talking about business amalgamations, readjustments, mergers, etc., etc. So this definition is more giving it a tax flavor rather than the other definition. But if you read the theme very carefully, they are saying the same thing. It's again linked with your commercial and economic reasons. Let's move to this, what OECD definition is saying. I'll just come back to this slide. But what is OECD saying? OECD, if you read chapter 9 of OECD, It says there is no universally accepted definition of business restructuring. There is no universally accepted definition. And OECD has tried to gather some definition for itself for the purpose of this OECD TP regulations, and it has said business restructuring is defined as cross-border redevelopment or redevelopment of by a multinational enterprise of functions, assets, or risks, which is what you must have heard in the earlier session. So, OECD's definition, if I see all of these definitions, is the most narrower, except 44 dB, which was even narrower. But if you see this definition, it's more narrower. But whenever you are trying to assess that what is a business restructuring, you will have to go back to these definitions. Because, and the reason why you need to do that is here. If you see the second point, with effect from Finance Act 2012, business restructuring has been included as an international transaction. So for you to report, or first of all, so you know there is a disclosure requirement which has been prescribed. Whenever you are preparing your 3CB, the business restructuring and business reorganization transactions have to be reported in Form 3CB. You cannot report it unless you discover it. And how do you discover it? Go back to these definitions. That is the relevance of all this, things that I have been discussing. Because unless you know what is that business restructuring, what will you report? How will you identify? So, going back to my earlier example, can a shifting of chairman be considered as business restructuring? The answer is no. Answer is no. Because these are the definitions which are available. Now, taxman can take a different view. We cannot stop him, but whatever best is available with us, these are the things which are available with us. So, any questions, any thoughts?
Making subsidies in another country is a business restructuring.
No?
Let's say for manufacturing of raw materials,
Yeah.
you are acquiring.
Yeah.
Yeah. So earlier you used to acquire it, but now we are manufacturing in a particular country. Okay. So is a business restructuring?
No.
Because there would be a future benefit would be available.
Correct. No. Answer is no. I think, has everyone heard that question? I'll just repeat it. He's saying that forming a subsidiary in let's say a country A to manufacture some products, does that amount to business restructuring? Because earlier I was procuring some those materials from some third party. Answer is no. Because if you look at the definitions very closely, what it is saying is
It is a business re-engineering.
Yeah. So let me just comment upon that. What is happening is, typically, what we will call as restructuring is, earlier this is a business rechange that you are doing, not a restructuring. Restructuring will be you are, let's say, manufacturing in Japan, and you may move that manufacturing base to India. That's a restructuring. That's a restructuring. But you are procuring goods from some third parties, and then you started, making it in-house by forming a subsidiary, setting up a plant or increasing the plant capacity. That does not amount to business restructuring. Because if you read all the definitions put together, go to OECDs, the taxmans, all of them. If you read all of them together, the theme which is coming out is there has to be some fundamental change within your organization. It's not that, you are excluding out a third party vendor and doing something in-house. That's not a restructuring. That
Because if you are increasing your profit in consolidation.
doesn't matter. So nowhere, okay. Nowhere.
So if you read the definition of this, there says.
Can I just go back?
Yeah.
Which definition?
No, the earlier the section 92B. It says
Slide?
just which were on definition that
Slide 9. Yeah.
slide 9. See the business restructuring or reorganization.
Correct.
Okay, which says irrespective of the fact that it bearing on the profit, income, losses, asset of such enterprise at a time of transaction
Correct.
or at any future date. Obviously, that the margin which I used to give it to a third-party vendor, it has been reduced, and now my future profit would be increased.
Correct.
So it's not a restructuring, but it's a reorganization.
Okay. Can I give you a counter question? Think about it. So I understood your point. You were saying that no, no. I'll just answer the point. So if you think about it, you are increasing your profit by rethinking. Just think about it. Today, you were doing an ad. You are promoting your product using me as your brand ambassador. Tomorrow you thought, I know that's not a right example. Tomorrow you thought you will take Sachin Tendulkar. Obviously your sales are going to increase. Will you say that this is a restructuring? No. Just I'm trying to draw a parallel. It's a parallel that I'm trying to draw. Not every move by a company to increase its profits should be taken as business restructuring. Taxman will argue the way you have tried to argue. He can. But not every move will be taken as a restructuring. There should be something which is fundamentally resulting in a change of your overall operations. If there was an entity that was manufacturing in Japan and you move that to an India, that's a business restructuring that you are talking about. Because otherwise what will happen is every transaction that you are doing, every move that you are doing is going to have an impact on your P&L. Obviously that's why you are doing it. You are in business. Then everything will be a business restructuring. So that is why it's the need of the hour, and that's why I was spending so much time in trying to decipher each and every word of that concept. That not everything can be classified as a business restructuring. Only those things which fundamentally change your internal business and internal processes will be characterized as restructuring. Yeah, please. Yeah. Yeah. Same thing. So answer will remain same. It will be a business restructuring that you are doing, because what you are doing is your plan is today to do that over a 5-year period, but you still have that plan. Your plan is to close China plant eventually. So that's a restructuring, and that is the precise reason why they have put this definition saying that irrespective of the fact whether it has an impact on the profits immediately or any time in the future. So that's the precise point that they have used this definition.
Sir, are you trying to say that even the acts which are done in an organic manner will also be covered by business restructuring?
X.
Egg.
Yeah.
Any actions on the front of restructuring, whether it is business or corporate, what I'm trying to say is, are this word organic and inorganic way of doing it, are they not suggested to be the benchmarks for deciding whether it is corporate restructuring or not?
No.
So even if somebody already manufacturing something in China, that company comes here and starts manufacturing in India, that would be organic. I mean, unless it takes over some other company,
Correct.
or unless it does it by through somebody else,
Correct.
will it still be called corporate restructuring?
So, that goes back to the point which someone made over here, that opening up a subsidiary, will that be a restructuring? The answer is, if I'm shutting down that plant and then bringing that plant into India. So let's say I was manufacturing in China, I decided to shut off Chinese plant because Indian profits are low cost or closer to market, whatever those reasons are. If I'm doing that, then it classifies as a restructuring, though it's an organic expansion. But since you're closing out something, it's a restructuring that we are talking about. But there is a difference. If you continue the plant in China and if you then continue build up a new plant in India, that's not a restructuring. That's just merely an expansion. So there is a thin line of difference between the two, and the thin line is that if there is something which you are trying to close down and then bring it entirely into India, then it will be called as a restructuring. If it is merely an expansion, it will not.
And which is that single definition which we can take up to get to this all conclusions? I mean, the thin line that you are trying to make out, does it come out of any
I think the best part we as TP professionals would like to rely here is the OECD definition, because that really brings out the real intention under a restructuring, which typically happens is that a group is trying to play around with the assets that it has. It could be the functional people that it has, it could be the intangibles that it has. It will like to shift those, play around with the assets that it has to generate more benefits for the group, and that's the real intention of any key restructuring assignment, where you are looking at garnering more value from the business. So that's the attack, which is the real intention, and that's where we as tax professionals or TP professionals would want to connect more to a definition which is the OECD sense of it. And that's where we said that though the taxman definition is this, though the Black's law defines this, but there is no pure tax context to each of those definitions. But if you really look at the OECD definition, it really has more of the context in terms of the intention today of the taxman is to catch all profit shifting, erosion of tax base. That's the real intention we are talking of. And that's where the OECD definition really hits there on the point to say that is there a transfer of assets happening? Is there a transfer of function happening? Are you shifting risk and thereby shifting the profitability? If yes, then that's where I want to catch you, because that's where a risk and reward ratio will fail. And if risk is shifting and your reward is also not shifting, then there is some mismatch, which is what the tax authorities want to catch. So that's really the biggest intention, and that's where we want to be closer to the OECD definition.
Some other buddy as an associate. When in India I open as another associate. So how can it be called restructuring?
No. See, I think. Okay. So okay. I'll take this up in lunch hour. Let's park this. Sorry, I think I'll just take one last question before we move ahead. I think you had something.
I was just trying to encapsulate what you said, that if the company finds a new way of doing the same old thing that it is doing, either through operations, technology, people, or IP rights, then basically it would be restructuring.
No. That's not what I said. No. See, it's like this. Earlier you were working on Tally. Now you have a SAP system. This is not a restructuring, because just go back to my example of brand ambassador me and versus Tendulkar. That cannot be a big restructuring.
Okay.
Restructuring, essentially, if you combine all these definitions together, is there should be some fundamental shift in the processes, such as you're moving a plant from China to India, you're closing out on that plant, you're trying to gain efficiencies from the Indian operations. That's a restructuring.
Okay.
Not that every process and every change will be called as restructuring. That's not what I said.
Okay.
There has to be cross-border redeployment, because unless it is being done at a local level, there's no tax impact really. So if, let's say, I restructure my Indian operations, shift it from Maharashtra to Nagpur, or Maharashtra to Gujarat, that's not a really restructuring. What restructuring we are talking about, because if I do this Maharashtra to Gujarat, still the taxes will be paid in India. What I'm talking about is cross-border redeployment, because that is where your tax base gets eroded. That's where I'm interested in this as a transfer pricing officer. Your local tax officer might still go and ask you some other questions, but as a transfer pricing officer or as a transfer pricing professional, this is what we are interested: cross-border redeployment. Yeah.
He gave an example that if instead of shutting your purchases and you open a manufacturing plant in some other country, so will that amount to a transfer in your function, wherein earlier you were purchasing and now you are manufacturing? As in case of an example of brand ambassador, there is no change of function drastically. It's only the person, it's only your business commercial decision that gets changed. Here your functioning gets changed. So, is there a difference, and will, this has to be taken into consideration in identifying whether it is a business reorganization?
So valid point. Let me answer that point very quickly. See, what we are talking about is the decisions or the restructuring which we are talking about is an internal restructuring. The decision to shut off purchases from a third party is qua the third party. Okay. Then what I'm doing is I'm just expanding my business. Expansion of business does not tantamount to business restructuring, which is of interest to the taxman. You're just expanding your operations. Nobody is bothered. If you close down a plant and open a new plant, then the thing is that the tax officer in China will want to see that what is the tax laws that he's going to have. because of this thing, and he would like to have the right amount of exit tax. That is the whole fundamental.
Got your point.
Yeah. Okay. So coming back to this definition. So one of the thing is, how do we identify the business restructuring? We had enough discussion on that. Having identified, you need to report in the Form 3CB. Interestingly, the new Form 3CB which is there, if you see all the clauses, it says that you have to disclose the arm's length value of other transactions. All those 13, 14 clauses that you have, 17 clauses rather. But for business restructuring, they have just said that you tell us that what is the agreement which you have done and what is the business restructuring that you have done. They have not asked you to report the arm's length value. So that's a good and a bad thing, because arm's length value will be determined by the tax authority then. But that's the disclosure that you need to do. Very interesting point is that this definition of international transaction, this amendment which has come up, that irrespective of the fact that it has a bearing on your income, profits, loss or assets, has a wide implication on some of the earlier rulings which have come on this topic. So which are the rulings? They are Vandenberg, Dana, Amyantit. The fundamental point is, have these been overruled? Rajesh, you want to?
I think the biggest point that all of us in transfer pricing were debating whenever this definition came up is that not necessarily every business restructuring results in a tax impact. Why do I disclose that? Because transfer pricing, the way section 92 starts, it says any income arising out of an international transaction. Now, when there is no income arising, when there is no taxable income, does it really make sense in reporting, and does TP really apply to here? And historically, if I have to look at all these rulings from the ARs that we had in terms of the Dana ruling, Amayantit, everyone in terms of fundamental came back to a point that if there is no taxable income, then transfer pricing as a section, which is the machinery provisions of the Act, does not really come into the picture. So then, can we take a view that this business restructuring is not resulting into a tax impact? Do I need to report it or not? Interestingly, after all of these rulings, there was a lot of silence in terms of any more knowledge on this. But there was a ruling in case of Castleton, which came much later on all of these aspects. And there was, sorry.
I think we still have some time. I know it's, we have some 25 minutes to go. Are all of you aware of what these rulings are? All? Okay. So why don't we spend 2 minutes on telling you the fundamentals of what these rulings were, and I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritties of it, but at a macro level, what these rulings have tried to say. So you take a ruling of Dana or Amyantit. Sorry, Rajesh, I'm just trying to. Whether you take a ruling of Dana or an Amyantit, they have tried to say that, in both these cases, there was a share transfer which was happening between overseas group companies of shares of an Indian group were transferred between two non-residents, taxable as per TP. So they were saying that no consideration was there. So it was either given as a gift or it was transferred without a consideration. And AR said that since there is no consideration, if you go back to section 45, the charging section for capital gains, it says the capital gains have to be determined in accordance with section 48. And section 48 says you have to have income less the expense is the value which you will use for your capital gains. So because there is no consideration, they came out with this principle that this mechanism of 48 fails, and since 48 is failing, 45 will fail, and there is no capital gains tax, and TP being just a machinery provisions will not apply. That was the ruling which was held in both Dana and Amyantit. Vandenberg was slightly on a different point. Vandenberg, what had happened was there was an overseas transfer, and that transfer was exempt from Indian taxation because of a treaty, India-Netherlands treaty. So there they said that since it is anyway exempt from tax, TP will not apply. So as Rajesh rightly put, in all these principles, the principle which was coming out was no tax, no TP. However, Dana and Amyantit, to my mind, were, with due respect to the AR, were wrong rulings, because the whole principle of TP is to have the right consideration. Just because you are not able to ascertain a consideration does not mean TP will not apply. But nevertheless, these were the principles, that no tax payable, no TP will apply. And the debate that we are trying to have now is that, having said this, that there is a 92 amended definition of 92B1, does these rulings get overruled? Yeah. Correct. Correct. Doesn't matter.
Strictly speaking, transfer per se, I mean, by a voluntary act of the party.
See, I think so. To just to add, it was pursuant to bankruptcy. But pursuant to bankruptcy, what this group had decided that it will form a new company. There will be infusion by a PE, and then those shares will move out. Still, it's a transfer. See, because if you see, I am interested in whether that transaction is taxable or not. Whether by operation of law, and that bankruptcy is US bankruptcy.
Yes, yes.
I don't really care. As an Indian tax authority, I really don't care. Is it taxable in India or not? That's the simple thing that I have to think of. So the AR never said that it is not taxable. The AR, because of business restructuring or a
Consideration
bankruptcy,
is not ascertained.
correct. That's the point.
There, can you not apply DC Srinivas if your
They applied.
monetary provision fails?
They applied a BC Srinivas Shetty in both Dana and Damayanti. They applied a BC Srinivas Shetty.
That is good law to my mind even today.
No, not really, not really.
Partly.
Because see, if you read this business reorganization along with your clause in your TCEB, it is a reporting provision. It is a procedural provision rather than a kind of effective substantive provision. You have to report.
Correct.
I mean, your obligation goes once you report.
No, I will rather.
Because arm's
I
length,
will.
you don't have to determine as of now.
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I have a different view on that. Rather, you have to be even more careful, and that's why I said that, you have to be even more careful when you're not reporting an arm's length value, because then you're leaving it open for the tax authority to come up with a value. Just think about all these cases of Vodafone and Shell 3, where the share issues are happening. The taxpayer determined the value as per using some DCF or the CCI guidelines. The value was computed, he never bothered to report it, it was not required, etc. But instead of, so let's say I think in case of Vodafone, the taxpayer came out with a value of 10 or 12,000. The tax authority came out with a value of 50,000 per share. So that's the ambiguity you have. If you are not able to ascertain that what is that value or the arm's length value in a business restructuring, you are leaving it open to the tax authority. So it's like giving AK-47 in the hand of a drunken monkey. You have to so say. He can fire in any direction. So I'll be more skeptical and worried to report this transaction and leave it open for the taxpayer authority to come back and say that this is the arm's length value.
Even if you don't report, you have to pay the penalty.
2% penalty.
You can still open your books
Oh yeah,
and see it. So,
yeah.
So penalty is where I feel we are going closer to an insurance agent. Every time we are threatening of penalty and we actually say that report everything and be safe. Coming back to this point on no tax, no TP, it's a heavily debated topic recently because of after the Castleton ruling really came and after the various amendments which came to overrule what BC Srinivas Shetty was actually saying in terms of the introduction of 50D and all those provisions to say that now consideration is not determined, go ahead and determine based on fair market value. So the point which really said that, okay, does that mean Dana and those other rulings are overruled? We don't have to look at those principles? That's where in time Castleton ruling really came into the picture. And what Castleton really brought out to say that, fair point, there is a situation, and Castleton was a situation where really the SSE was claiming a treaty benefit, which was very close to an approach which was in the case of Vandenberg, which was there. So when you are claiming a treaty benefit and there is a no tax situation which is arising because of the treaty benefit, do you really want to report such a transaction or no? Because as per 90A we know, we'll report whatever is favorable to the SSE. The point which was made by the AR at that point in time was that fair, that's a position which is being taken by the SSE, and the tax authority should be given a chance to at least verify the position which the SSE is taking is correct or not. Now keeping in few more points in consideration here is that whether residency test is met or not, whether TRC is required, is that TRC available to you, is the treaty benefit really available to you, are you looking at the right characterization as per the treaty. Those are the questions where the taxpayer had really taken positions, and those are not something which is a clear flow from the act to say that okay, the act clearly says this is an exempt income, so there is no further debate about that income. So keeping in perspective what really is happening around, the authority for advanced ruling really said that fair point, you can go ahead and say that this is not taxable, but you will still have the onus of doing a Form 3CB filing. You will have to report this transaction, file the 3CB and do the compliance for that. So that's the new thought process which is there. To an extent that sounds fair, and that's really which comes out from this expansion to the definition which has happened, which clearly goes and says, irrelevant of the impact on profit, loss, asset, liability, whatever, you please go ahead and report any transaction of a business restructuring, because it could have some future impact which the tax officer really wants to be aware of it at this point in time, if it's something which is that the case.
So, I think the broad view, and I will be taking a conservative view, is that whenever this business restructuring or business reorganization is happening, and you think in your best judgment it will classify under these definitions, you can take guidance from some of these. Please report, because penalty for non-reporting is very steep. 2% of the value of international transaction for non-reporting, 2% for non-maintenance of documentation. And obviously, if you are not reported, you will not be able to, give it during the TP audit. 6% is a cumulative penalty. I will be very skeptical and say that conservatively, please report. And do the groundwork, do the homework well. Have your things to say that why no value should be attributed or whatever that is. But do your homework well and please report. So we talked about this issue. I'm not, so for two things, for want of time, and second is for in the next, next Saturday, we have this session where I'm going to talk about the subscription of shares in detail. So I'm not touching it. All of you know it, what it is. So I'm just skipping it out. This is probably something which all of you need to be aware of. So M&A, mergers and acquisitions. There are various type of restructuring which can happen through an M&A type of deal. It can be by way of a merger, it can be by way of a demerger, amalgamation, stock purchase, asset purchase, slump sale, buyback, capital reduction. So there are a whole host of things which you can do. What we have tried to do is to evaluate some of the TP implications from some of these transactions, not all, which could be critical. So I'm not getting into the definitions. You can see section 2.5 and 219 AA for merger and amalgamation definitions. But yeah,
Conversion, what would be your view?
Conversion to an LLP.
Maybe to an LLP, maybe to a different entity. So there's a Bombay High Court judgment, taxpaying. The conversion, there is no transfer or transferring. I mean, only one can exist at any point of time.
Yeah, so that's why people have been trying to take that route. To my mind, it should not, classify as restructuring, because we have the Bombay High Court judgment also on this. And since you're just converting a characterization of an entity, I don't think that should be allowable, because see, again it goes back to the question of whether there is a difference between tax planning and tax evasion. It goes into that realm. And tax planning within the four corners of law, we have a section on GAR. I'll talk about it. But before GAR coming in, tax planning is still permissible. So go back to this section of, I've just got this case study for all of you. See, what is happening in this case is there is a transfer of shares of an Indian company from one foreign company to another foreign company. What happens in this scenario? Obviously, that transaction is going to be taxable in India. So then what? If it is taxable, then we have to have TP implication on this. But what comes to our rescue is, if you go back to section 47(6)(b), it says if there is a merger of a foreign company with another foreign company, and because of that and the conditions of the merger are such that post merger about 25% of the shareholding remains unchanged, and it's a tax neutral in the country in which the merged entity is located. That's a transaction which is not treated as transfer. So accordingly, since it is not treated as a transfer, it is not taxable. Since it is not taxable, TP will not apply. This provision still holds good to my mind, irrespective of the business restructuring thing that we have done. But yes, probably you'll have to report this transaction in the Form 3CB, but you need to make a disclosure in your Form 3CB itself, even in your TP report, that because of the operations of Section 47 and Section 92 being a machinery provision, TP will not apply to this transaction. Clear? Any doubts, any thoughts on this? Okay. Same is the case with a demerger. If there is a demerger of one unit business B to another unit business B, same provisions, go back to Section 47, 7C. It says that if there is a demerger of this kind which is happening and 3/4 of the shareholders or 70% of the shareholding remains same, then, and it's a tax neutral transaction, then TP will not apply. Or it is not treated as a transfer. Since it is not treated as transfer, TP will not apply. So, despite change in this definition of Section 92B, even I'm repeating myself, these provisions will still hold true unless Section 47 is changed. I can skip this. Buyback. All of you will know under the erstwhile provisions of Companies Act Section 77AA and now it's Section 68. It's buying back your own shares. So what is going to happen is, the implications of this is that the shareholder will have to pay a capital gains tax. With effect from Finance Act 2012, there is a provision which has been brought, 115 QA, which says that even the company will have to pay a withholding tax. And that's basically coming out from that ruling of AR in case of Otis, Limited. What was happening was, people were doing a buyback as a provision to, pay out money without paying this DDT. And AR actually applied a judicial GAR. Still, we don't have statutory GAR, so they applied a judicial GAR, and to say that transactions in this nature, which are transferring money out of India with a way to escape tax or evade tax, will be liable to tax in India. Post that Otis ruling, there is amendment which has been made to say that if there is a buyback which is happening, this will be liable to a withholding or a DDT has to be paid by the company at the rate of 20%. Whenever you are doing a buyback, TP will apply, because the value at which shares were subscribed and the value at which you are redeeming, that has to be at arm's length, because there is going to be a capital gains impact on that. So you need to compute the fair value and do a disclosure. There is no escaping from this. Rajesh, you want to add anything on this capital gains? Right? I just want to skip these a bit fast because I want to go to some of the examples that we have, or we can talk about this.
If you can spend a few minutes on capital reduction, maybe.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I think just one key point on capital reduction, and that's where we are continuously harping on the discussion that no tax on no TP, is that if you really look at the theme on the merger example, the demerger example and all those, we are trying to convey the message clearly is that if any of these transactions are not taxable, there is no worry in terms of transfer pricing, except conservatively you may want to report that transaction. That's the only message that we are trying to say. In terms of capital reduction also, typically what happens is that in the hands of the company, the maximum implication could be that there would be a deemed dividend tax which will be there. Nothing beyond that. But when we are talking in the case of a shareholder, there would be a capital gain implication, and wherever a foreign shareholder is participant to such a capital reduction exercise, that is where a debate will occur. And all of us would be aware of various rulings which are there in this case, because this is again a highly debated situation. We had a special bench in case of Mumbai Tribunal on Bennett and Coleman on this. We had few Supreme Court rulings on capital reduction. The theme again from the various Supreme Court rulings and the special bench ruling is coming out is that first you need to really check whether a capital reduction is really resulting into a transfer. And if that doesn't result into a transfer, if the SSC or the shareholder, the situation is similar to what it was pre-capital reduction, then is there really a transfer which has happened? If no, then that is where you come back to BC Srivastava City and say that no capital gains, no taxable impact, no TP applies again. So now the theme, whatever it may be, continues the same. That's the point we wanted to make.
Acquisitions, you skip the slide and you are saying that TP will not apply. Just very fast, can you say why it will not apply?
Okay. See, what we wanted to say is that, if there is an Indian company which is interposed and you make it a domestic transaction, then TP will not apply. That's what we are trying to say. So there is a foreign company, there is an Indian company which it is holding. You interpose another Indian company and you sell the shares from India to India. Since this transaction is happening from one Indian entity to another Indian entity, it's not cross-border. That's why TP will not apply. That's what we wanted to say.
I think the example will explain this.
Yeah. We have an example. We have a case study. So I want to rush to the case studies where we will be discussing some of these. Maybe some of these things. I just want to put two things. This issue of equity shares. Let's park that. I'm anyway covering it in the next week. So let's hold on to that. How do you benchmark it, etc. But preference shares, I wanted to just elaborate. Preference shares, when you are allotting, is there a TP implication or not? Because equity shares, all of us, we have been contending, it's a capital receipt, not taxable, etc., etc. What happens to a preference shares? Any difference in that? Why TP will apply to or should not apply to a preference shares? Is there a difference between equity and preference shares? Any thoughts?
Shares is a liability. Maybe over a period of time you have to pay it back. So
Equity is also a liability.
equity is okay. In the Indian parlance, fine, we can buy back and make it somewhat similar to preference capital. But prima facie, if you cannot issue irredeemable preference shares. So that way, ultimately, it has to pay back over a period of time. Whatever maybe the tenure, max 20.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. Okay. Any last comment?
And
on
in
this?
the New Companies Act, it has been made at par to some extent, and probably you might be referring, like for the purpose of considering subsidiary companies, even paid up capital of preference capital also would be counted, which is not counted till March.
See, I'll tell you this is based on what I understand. There's a difference, because when you're talking about preference dividend and preferential shares, there is a coupon rate which is upfront fixed, unlike equity. So what happens is, in an equity, you can distribute a dividend 20%, 30%. It's a unilateral act. It is not decided. You might decide not to give a dividend at all. That's a unilateral act of the company, of this Indian company. Let's say I'm talking about India and US. But what happens in a preference shares? You decide the coupon rate of preference shares upfront. So it is more closer to a loan, and that's why you need to benchmark that coupon rate. So whether it's an inbound or an outbound preference shares, you need to benchmark that coupon rate upfront. How do you benchmark that? There are ways and methods. You need to find out what is the bond yield and add a premium to that. So there are statistical tools. Let's not get into that. But bear in mind, whenever you're dealing with a preference shares, TP will apply upfront, unlike equity. And whenever you're doing a benchmark, these type of transactions typically deviate away from the traditional TP methods. Under a traditional TP method, you start with a FAR analysis, you come out with a characterization, etc. It's not required here, because what you're doing is you're valuing that particular commodity or the preference shares. You're not valuing the company. Irrespective of what he is doing, it doesn't matter. So that's one thing in your which you need to keep in mind. And again, coming back, documentation has to be kept in place. You need to maintain the requisite documentation to justify whatever you're doing. Valuation, let's park this. I will discuss this in the subsequent session. Case studies on transfer pricing. This is what we wanted to really get at. Rajesh.
I think this is the scenario of a typical case where there are two foreign companies who are actually talking of a worldwide acquisition, and then there are Indian companies who are actually taking part into the natural course of action in terms of the group merging or demerging, because in terms of one of the activities here they want to demerge. So looking at a specific scenario here, if you really look at the situation, there is a situation where there is a demerger happening at the India level. If you can go to the diagram, Arun, the next slide please. Yeah, thank you. So here the demerger is happening at the India level, but because of a global acquisition, the group is now consolidating itself and there is a demerger which is happening. This demerger is probably will result into a tax-free demerger under the Indian regulations. So one will say that there is no role TP has to play in this. Two key aspects which one will have to look at from a TP perspective, and I will make a third point which probably we may want to think once, is that first, the TP policies between different companies will be different. Some ITS company, as in the example, is operating at cost plus 15, another is operating at cost plus 10. We need to align both the policies together, because though the groups have merged, that doesn't really mean the policies have equally got merged. So do we want to follow the policy of the entity which it is merging into, or we don't have to policy which has to be followed by the earlier erstwhile entity? Those are the issues which typically one will have to deal with. One of the other points which we really wanted to make in this is that if you try to look at the situation, somewhere we were talking on the acquisition side of it, is that let's look at section 92B2, which talks of deemed international transactions. And in this case, the deal terms and conditions, if the terms and conditions of the deal were agreed by the overseas parent companies, and it was just that the execution piece was happening at the India level, probably there was a sense to say that this is an international transaction, and hence transfer pricing provisions will apply to these transactions, even if one has to leave aside for a moment to say that this is a demerger happening only at the India level. So let's look at a situation that there is no demerger happening, there is another transaction happening between two Indian entities because of a deal which is happening at the overseas level. It's typical 92B2 situation to say that if the terms and conditions are really governed by the overseas parties for the Indian entities, it will taken as a deemed international transaction. Now that was a very debatable view, and there we had some clarity because of some tribunal rulings in the case of Kodak and Swarna-Andhra, which referred to say that the intention of the section 92B2, because it is part of 92B1 and consequentially to be read along with 92A, is that it's talking of an international case where there is a cross-border transaction and a third party is imposed to play around to say that TP will not apply. That is the real intention here, and not to catch hold of transactions between two domestic parties. But we would want to believe more in terms of the judicial interpretation on this point, is that are the terms and conditions of the contract really governed by the overseas parties? If that is something which no one can prove, then there is no case to say that there is any deemed international transaction here. You want to add any more point on it?
So just like in case of Kodak, when tribunal was coming to its conclusion that it's a deal between two domestic parties and valuation was done independently, etc., the tribunal specifically made a point that there is no material on record to prove that the transaction between Kodak India and Carestream was a party to which transfer has happened, was influenced in any manner by Kodak US. So it was an independent transaction. So the word of advice that to all of you is that whenever there are such type of deals happening, just don't take recourse of Kodak and Swarna-Andhra and start saying that because this is a deal between two Indian parties, TP will not apply. Don't do that. Please look at who is the person who is driving these who is dictating the terms of this contract. Is it overseas or is it India? Please have that in mind, because this will have a larger TP implications otherwise.
And just wanted to leave another thought here to everyone. What would be the real implication under section 188 of the New Companies Act? Because we have always been talking of transfer pricing and international merger, demerger, or international restructuring. But today, when we are talking of section 188, all the related party transactions, whether it are international or domestic, section 188 wants to apply arm's length principle to all those transactions, where this is completely different as compared to what the domestic TP is, because domestic TP was on a few chosen sections, which was 48(2)(b and the tax holiday sections. But here Companies Act has opened a complete big box to say all related party transactions will something which will fit. So any small merger, demerger or any small restructuring within the group, probably you'll want to look at now at arm's length principle more closely in all those deals as well.
Because now it's a in under section 188 of the Companies Act, it's the personal liability of the director now. So, and there is an imprisonment clause also. So be more careful on that. Ritvik, we are running a bit out of time. What do you want to do? 5 minutes?
Give this example and you make the point on GAR. I think that's more relevant.
So, okay, I'm just skipping this example and maybe during lunch we can discuss it offline. GAR. Sure, all of you know GAR. Only this example is what I thought we'll talk, that why GAR is being put in place. Why? Because what is happening is there are some unintended consequences which people have been trying to derive by making mixing 2 or 3 provisions of the act. And so take this example. This example, holding company, let's say US company was holding Indian company. What it did was demerged it into a Mauritius company. By operation of section 47(7)(b), this demerger is exempt from tax. So this is a tax-free transaction. And then subsequently what Mauritius company is doing is that it is doing a buyback. Now since this buyback is being done and by a Mauritius entity, the gains are taxable in Mauritius, and as per India Mauritius, it is taxable in Mauritius the capital gains is nil. So by adopting 2 provisions of the Income Tax Act, what taxpayer has done in this thing is that he has tried to evade the capital gains tax completely in India. These are the type of things which GAR is trying to catch. So this is just a flag that I thought I'll give you, because I'm sure you must be coming across these type of exotic structures which are being put by some of the taxpayers. Don't just get carried away, because these will have repercussions in the longer run. GAR is going to be applicable from 1st April 2016. But if you are coming across any of these type of deals, please be aware, because though we don't have a judicial GAR now, we don't have a statutory GAR now, we still have a judicial GAR. That is a limited message that I wanted to give. And there are GAR provisions which all of you know. Don't want to get into that. Yeah. No. So this is, see, I've just tried to say that how you can use 2 provisions, to do these type of deals. And if you go back to the case of Otis, post which that DDT came into picture, it was something similar to this. So that's all from my side. We can talk over the lunch, but any questions I will be happy to take up. There is. Yeah. Yeah. There is. Under 115 QA, there is. Yeah.
As my understanding was, we are not as such bound squarely by the OECD guidelines.
Yeah.
However, when it came to be guided about the definition of business or reorganization, we said it is the being TP professional. Rachesh made a point that being TP professionals will have to be predominantly be guided by the OECD way of looking at it.
Correct.
So can you just clarify? I mean,
Sure. That's a good point. Let me just elaborate on this. We are not statutorily guided by OECD, because we are not a part of OECD. We are just an observer to OECD. But if you go back to the case laws on TP, see, because TP in India is still in its nascent stage. It's been just 11 years since that we have. But whenever there are, and if you read the TP provision section 92, it is just given there without any explanation. There are so many things which are just not brought out, like the definition of business restructuring. So where do you go? What is the recourse that you need to have? And the recourse is OECD. Because if you see many of the tribunal judgments, many of them now, they have heavily relied upon OECD. Now some of the tribunal judgments have also come back saying that we will rely upon OECD to the extent they are not contrary to the Indian TP law or Indian law. But fundamentally, if you see, OECD is taken or is accepted even by tax authorities, at least at the tribunal level, not at the TP level. TPO they will do if it favors them, but at a tribunal level, OECD has been accepted, and that is where we are saying that if you read all these definitions, and that's why we have tried to bring out some 3 or 4 definitions. If you read all these definitions, that is where they are going, giving a hint that whenever there is a cross-border redeployment of assets, functions, or risks, that should be treated as a business restructuring.
The point to add here is that if you look at the other definitions, there is no specific context in which those definitions are really made. Those are more broader and generic definitions. But if you look at the OECD, it's a specific thought brought out from a tax and a TP perspective on the same point which the law is wanting to make. And that's where we are saying that if this is a specific thought, then probably the specific definition intends to bring out the right aspect rather than a generic definition under any other aspect. That's the real point.
Even by the same logic, we can use section 482 regs and ATO's ruling.
Yeah. So a point very well made. USTP law or USTP regulations, the ATO definitions are being used. They are being used. If you go to the, whenever we are dealing with this corporate guarantees issue, we deal with, we take guidance from the ATO guidelines. They are probably one of the best ones. So we do, tax authorities do take cognizance of that. And tribunals, as I said, OECD is being heavily relied upon by them also. Because you don't have guidance, where do we go?
I mean, sorry, just to add one more point here, can't resist, is that if you really look at exit tax situation, which Bipin would have spoken in the morning on that point, today Income Tax Act does not talk of any exit tax. Does
Correct.
that mean we'll never charge any exit tax? Does that mean the authorities don't really expect? Probably not. And that's where we'll have to look at the guidance which is available and the mechanism in which the world is looking at the law.
Correct. So,
Any restructuring is already getting covered in the other part of the DB provisions where you are transferring some IPs.
yeah,
Would you still cover it under the restructuring?
I will be careful and do that. I will be careful. Out of abundant caution, because see, anyway you are reporting, sale of IP is being reported in one of the earlier clauses under intangible clause. But I will still report it over here because it does not take anything for me to report. But if I don't report, there is a 2% penalty which I am subject to. So
Because there was also a discussion where there are transactions which get covered under ATIA 810 also and 40A 2B also. Now,
Yeah.
is it that you report at
that's
both the places?
so that stands on a bit of a different footing from this.
Once I say I have reported the transaction.
No, I
So
would want to add a
I'll-
point here.
I'll
Sorry, please
Oh,
go ahead.
good.
Just a point to made here is that when business reorganization is intended to report, it is not a single transaction of intangible transfer that one is talking of, or a small function transfer which issue of shares, assuming you are reporting somewhere else. It is a holistic transaction in itself is something which you are reporting, and that's where you really look at the reporting obligation in the form 3CB does not really want you to put across one transaction and one value. It says you report the business transaction, you report the terms based on which it is, you report the broad agreement that is entered into, and you just report that transaction based on which you believe that the method which it is arm's length. It does not really want you to go into each and every single transaction of that. So if that they assume would be reported individually in the form, but I would want to take a better view that those individual transactions would have any been reported. It's just that the holistic picture you are trying to bring, that the intention of all these multiple transactions is to enter into a business restructure.
Yeah. So one last question. Anyone? I know someone is waiting for you outside the lunch. Okay, that's it from our side. Thank you.
Your name is restructure or reorganization? Sorry.
The name is
Structured originally, there is a story is that it's the first letters of my father, mother and my brother's name. But fortunately it has a meaning also. It's Brahma, Rachna plus Ish.
Friends, coming to the pleasant task of proposing a very well-deserved vote of thanks to both the learned speakers Arun and Rajesh, you all will agree that both of them generated a quite good amount of discussion during their presentation along with the case study. This will go a long way in understanding and interpreting the issues involved in that. I, on my behalf and on behalf of all present, propose a very well-deserved vote of thanks and request you carry with loud applause. We are running little short of time, so we request you to reassemble by 2 o'clock.